So this is obviously a bit of a reversal. When I'm shooting TED, I am down there photographing whoever's standing here. So it's very, very, very bizarre for me to stand in front of you. But that's okay, because that's all what's supposed to happen. So let me talk about photography. First off, my photography at TED is all about taking what's happening in 3 dimensions and reducing it to a 2-dimensional image that we then can share to the public. So when a speaker is speaking on stage, like I'm doing right now, at TED, the normal flow is that they'll talk, and then some images will get posted to the blog and the website right after they go out, and then sometime later their video will come out. So these still images that we make are kind of the first taste of what people see at TED. This is kind of a prototypical TED image. You've all seen this kind of style a zillion times. We've actually worked on this for years. It's all about trying to give a sense that a speaker is on stage, that they're giving a presentation, and capturing some sort of motion without going too far. You know, over the years, we've gone in tight, we've gone in loose, and as far as kind of the iconic TED shot, we've settled somewhere about here. Now, of course, the speaker provides the rest of the sauce, and it's always a matter of finding the right moment in time. Now, sometimes some speakers come along with their own props, like flying robots. And in that case, we get to wait for the right time and the right gesture as he releases the flying robot to take off and capture that to send out to everybody. Other times, with some artists, it gets a little tricky. This guy was making sand sculptures on stage, and he had his projection apparatus. And so I layered him with his artwork behind, and then that kind of weird glow from the projection kind of lighting up his eyes, telling a very interesting story. Now, our performers can really make this super challenging, right? There are times when it's really handy to have a camera that can shoot at 9 frames per second. The trick there is to make sure to pick which second you want to shoot in, because you can't just sit there and you have to line everything up and then release what you can do. Musicians are great. All you have to do to capture a musician kind of in their zone is listen to the music and let it move you, and you can find where the right place is to make a photograph of them. Such as when you get a real nice burst of emotion while the performer is playing a ukulele, of all things. Other times, I get a chance to kind of set a bunch of stage elements up at once to make an image that goes a little beyond what you might actually expect to see. Like, in this case, her violin didn't actually explode. I was able to set the shot up by using some interesting stage lighting that was going to happen. Now, I'm going to show you a quick video of how this shot's set up. And what I want you to do is look at the lights, and at first you'll see some yellow highlights coming through, and then you'll see the white highlights coming through. When I see the white highlights, I knew I had a chance to make a shot. And if you look at the bottom, you can see how that lineup will happen. As you can see, she's a very vigorous performer. And you see the lights go white. And then right here, you can see her hair. She's right in the moment. If you look behind her, you see a light coming down. And if you look right at the very bottom, I had scooted right into position to capture that. So I show you this because it's a really good illustration of taking that what's happening in 3 or 4 dimensions, actually, 3-dimensional space and then time, and trying to collapse it all down into an image that's in the frame. You know, you, the viewer, you weren't there experiencing that particular moment in time, but what we're trying to do as a photographer, any photographer is trying to do is take what's happening in front of them, translate it into a frame that they can then hand to somebody else that wasn't there, and they get a story out of it. Now, the whole thing of flares, I have to confess, I'm a super sucker for flares. This was a few years ago with a performance rehearsal backstage. And I actually had to lay down on the stage to get this flare shot with the performers, but it somehow tells a story of the dancers. But of course, TED is only a couple weeks a year. I spend the rest of the year actually out in the world traveling, such as finding myself on an island in Greece, or sitting on top of a temple in Bagan. So there's this valley in Bagan that's full of thousands of temples that were built 1,000 years ago. And if you get up early in the morning, you can go climb to the top of one of them and shoot out over everything and capture amazing moments. This is a bit south of there in Mandalay. We went to a monastery, and for some reason, as we were walking through this monastery, this image of everyday life, monks that wear these saffron robes, well, they still have to do laundry. They still have to hang them up to dry. And that little kind of, that imagining myself actually hanging up my clothes to dry connected me to the monks in some way where I couldn't understand the rest of their experience, but I could understand that and then pass it on to a viewer. And then, of course, a little bit south of that, there's this lake. There's a fishing island in the middle of a lake in Burma that's connected to the mainland through this very tiny little bridge. Now, it's a bridge. People commute over it every day like any of us do day in, day out, except this bridge happens to be made out of wood without a guardrail, and you have monks and bicyclists going down it. And if you sweet talk to people that have boats out there, you can get out there at sunset and, make yourself a photo like this. Now, this photo could have been the result of going somewhere and planning a big trek and waiting for the right moment and, consulting celestial databases or I don't know what. But it's not any of that. I was at a friend's wedding in the Netherlands, and he had this big event outside, and we were all hanging out, and there was kind of a lull, and I looked over on the lake, and the light set itself up like this. And so I excused myself from the party, took my camera over, made a few shots, and then went back. This was a similar situation. I was in Havana with some friends, and we were drinking mojitos in a hotel kind of courtyard. So, you can set the picture that we weren't really being too serious. And all of a sudden, I saw this, and I pulled out my camera, and I was shooting this palm tree, right? And my friends were like, "You've seen palm trees before, haven't you? Come on." I was like, no, look behind it. You see the halo back there, the 22-degree halo that's caused by the refraction of ice crystals off the upper atmosphere? And they all went, "Ooh," and of course, then we all were taking pictures of the palm tree, and all the other guests in the hotel thought we were insane. This is also from Cuba. This was walking along the Malacan, and we found some kids playing ball in this abandoned courtyard. Now, seen lots of kids playing balls in lots of different places, but this abandoned courtyard had this texture. And so I chose to focus on the texture and layer the kid with his ball in silhouette to tell this story. When you're out in the world traveling and looking for photos, one of the hardest things to do is be able to put yourself into a scene and not have that feeling like I'm interjecting here, I'm the imposter, I'm forcing myself into the scene. And you really don't have a choice, right? Like in Cuba, I'm the pale, definitely American guy hanging out on the street there. I'm going to stand out. But my trick there is to go somewhere and then hang out long enough that even though I'm the outsider, they know I'm there, they know I have a camera in my hand, but then they start going about their life again. And if you wait it out, if you wait in the scene, then people will become themselves again and ignore you, and you can capture a moment like this. Or sometimes you have to just be available to the moments that present themselves. I was at camel races in Qatar, and we ran across these Bedouins from Oman, and they invited us into their tent for coffee and smoking God knows what. And we hung out for a few hours, and I made this photograph. Now, you get the idea. I do a lot of traveling, and I love to travel. I love to travel a lot because it gives me an ability to step out of myself and take a look at the world for what it really is. In fact, when I'm wandering through the corridors of, say, underneath Heathrow, and I'm jet lagged to no end, right? Even that jet lag feeling kind of helps that process along of seeing the world in a new way. But it's been recently that I've actually figured out how to communicate that in a way to other people that might make a little bit of sense. Earlier this year, I started a practice of meditation. Now, if you've done meditation, you know that the idea there is to be able to be with yourself and to strip away some of those preconceptions, strip away the thoughts, and just see things for what they really are. And there's this practice in meditation called walking meditation. Now, the first time I heard of this, I was like, what the hell? Am I supposed to walk around with my eyes closed and like bump into things? That's not it at all, right? The idea is that you go out into the world and you see it for what it is without your own layering and preconception on top of it. So I gave it a try. And the first time I did it, I was in Portland walking down the road. And at first it was a little tough. And then as I got into it, I noticed that I could see all sorts of things a little more clearly. I could see like the edges of leaves on the trees and the way that the leaves were just turning because fall was coming. And the fact that just the sidewalk had its texture. Everything had its texture in a place. And it was almost like a little bit of a psychedelic experience, I have to admit. But in that moment, it reminded me of something that I've noticed in photography, that when I am in a moment, in a place, looking at what's really in front of me, that's when I can find some amazing photographs. You know, all the gear, it's cool and fun, but that's gear and that enables whatever. You know, for me, it's really all about finding this one place in time where I can see clearly. So after picking this up, you know, I can walk into a place like the Museum of Islamic Art in Qatar and know to look up. And when I look up and I see something, I can go, oh, wait, I have to stop and make a photograph like this. Or walking down a street in Tunis and finding kittens, right? How can you say no to these kittens? They're great. You know, you got the one guy over here going, hey, who are you? And another guy, you got some food? And you got that one up on the far side that's just like, don't mess with me. You know, all kidding aside, you know, through the experiences of traveling and seeing all these sights and then mapping it with the meditation, you know, I come back to a quote that I'm going to paraphrase from Marcel Proust, which is, you know, it's not about the traveling, it's about seeing the world through new eyes. So, and that can happen wherever you happen to be. Like here, I was walking out of a meeting in New York, in Brooklyn, and I saw the lights in the sky, or I saw the sun in the sky starting to do this amazing thing with the clouds. I knew half an hour later it was going to be amazing, so I walked down to the waterside, hung out for a bit, and waited. Doesn't have to be elsewhere. This is actually outside my apartment window in Portland, Oregon. Now, I happen to pick my apartment with a great view. You know, I admit that. But New Year's morning, this last New Year's, there was this heavy fog bank. And I woke up early. I just arrived from Europe, and I was jet lagged. So I sat on the couch and watched the fog kind of come and go. And then the sun started rising, and I went and pulled the camera out and pulled a few shots just from my couch, basically. This is also from my couch, right? It rained one day. Yes, it rains in Portland. The stories are true. And when it does, sometimes we get magnificent rainbows. Or this is an hour away from where I live, less than an hour away. It's a place that I know well, but a friend and I were walking in downtown Portland, and the weather was feeling like it was going to be a good day, so we kind of played hooky and made a quick trip and went somewhere where we knew that we could combine great light with a great scene. This is actually just in the Forest Park behind where I live. And this is on the way to the airport. So it's almost like once you get to a certain point with photography and you start figuring out that it's about this reduction of 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions, you can almost start playing with it, making it like a kid's game. And you don't need, as I was saying, you don't need the fancy cameras. You don't need the high-tech whatevers. You can do it with the tool that we all have. You know, these little camera phones that we have in all of our pockets make an excellent tool to sketch the world around us. In fact, the last few photos you've seen have been not with my big gear, but with my iPhone. And so, speaking of, you know, playing with iPhones, there's a trick. There's a little game I play, and I would like to give this game to you. The game is, I'll put a song on my iPod, the iPod app on my iPhone, and or I'll set a timer, and I'll go walking. And whenever the song's done or the timer goes off, I'll stop, wherever I happen to be. Maybe it's a sidewalk, maybe it's a parking lot, maybe it's someplace neat. And I'll pull out my phone, and I won't let myself leave until I find a photograph worth taking. And that forces me to sit down and really look at the world and see what I can get. Even if it's a boring parking lot, sometimes there's still a decent photograph there. So I invite you to play this game along with me, right? Go out, and if you have any interest at all, take your phone, make a photo. Do it during the break after the session, and find something in your environment around you that just captures your eye. Make a photograph and give it the conference hashtag, and let's kind of see what everybody else sees that we may not have seen ourselves. So, thank you very much.